January 23rd, 1984 is arguably the most historic day in professional wrestling history. On this day, Hulk Hogan would beat the Iron Sheik for the World Wrestling Federation Championship. The wrestling world would never be the same. The Hulkster would hold the title for 1,474 days. During that lengthy reign, he would defend the belt against a who's who of 1980s pro wrestling. Legends like Roddy Piper, Andre the Giant, Macho Man, One Man Gang, and Rick Rude would all fall at the feet of Hulk Hogan and feel the power of Hulkamania. This episode of Two Views Wrestling, we will look at 5 guys that weren't in the WWE during this time and could have been formidable challengers for Hogan. Before we get to the list, remember to leg drop the like button and hit a finger poke of doom on the subscribe button to stay up to date with everything from Two Views Wrestling. Now let's start the list, brother. Number 5, the Fabulous Freebirds. Hulk Hogan was great when the deck was stacked against him. Whether it was the Twin Towers, the Mega Bucks, or the Heenan family, Hulkster would always overcome the odds. The Fabulous Freebirds team, consisting of Terry Bam Bam Gordy, Michael P.S. Hayes, and Buddy Jack Roberts, were great at beating people up. Their rivalry with the Von Erich boys in Dallas did big business and is one of the best rivalries of all time. The Birds would have a cup of coffee in the WWE in 1984, but were quickly fired because of their partying ways. I think the Freebirds battling Hogan would have been a great feud. Buddy Roberts was that sneaky rat-like heel that would have drawn huge heat with fans. Hayes and the Hulkster could have went promo for promo, and finally Gordy and Hogan would have cooked in the ring. I think WrestleMania 2 would have been bigger if we got Hogan and Terry Gordy in the cage, with Hayes and Roberts keeping Hogan from escaping at every turn. Of course, Hulkamania would run wild, and Bad Street USA would have a new boss on the block. Number 4, the Great Muta. The Great Muta and Hulk Hogan would lock up in Japan in the early 90s. That match has gone viral the last few years, as a lot of people use that as an example of what Hogan could do in the ring. The match featured a lot of grappling, and the Hulkster would even hit an enziguri. The Great Muta didn't break onto the scene of WCW until March of 1989, but if he had shown up in WWE in 1988, there's no doubt in my mind that him and Hogan would have been a great match for the main event of the first SummerSlam. Add Gary Hart as the manager for Muta, and Vince McMahon would have had a blockbuster on his hands. Hart is possibly the greatest manager ever, and he would have done a great job of getting over the fact that the Great Muta was going to bring about the end of days for Hulkamania. Hogan did his best work with monsters, but he could get down with the smaller guys too. He had great matches with Savage, DiBiase, Rude, and Mr. Perfect. Muta would have been no different. They could incorporate some of the Japanese style just to showcase what Hogan could do. I think the image of Hogan beating the Great Muta with mist all over his face would make a great image and add to the legend of the Hulkster. Number 3, Nikita Koloff. There are a lot of rumors surrounding the main event of WrestleMania 2. There were talks of bringing in different guys to face Hogan for the title. Supposedly, Vince McMahon made a huge offer to Nikita Koloff. The Cold War was still going on, and if WWE was able to give us the Russian Nightmare versus the Real American, WrestleMania 2 would have blown WrestleMania 1 out of the water. This could have been the wrestling version of Rocky IV. The Russians built a monster and sent him to destroy America, and the best way to do that is to smash America's hero. Nikita would match up well with Hogan as he was a big powerhouse. Again, Hogan is great at selling for heels, and he would have made Nikita look like a destroyer. An aspect of Hogan's matches that worked was when the opponent had a manager. It gave this sense that Hogan was outnumbered, and it always got a huge pop when Hogan would deck the manager. The perfect manager for Nikita would be his uncle Ivan. Ivan Koloff beat the unbeatable Bruno Sammartino, and now he's bringing his monster nephew to dethrone Hulk Hogan. Number 2, Bruiser Brody. Another rumored name for WrestleMania 2 was Bruiser Brody. There was no way this pick would have worked, as Brody would only do what worked for him and he wasn't going to lay down for Hogan. Maybe if they had a cage match and Hogan won by climbing out, Brody would have agreed. But you don't want to be locked in a cage with Brody. Just ask Lex Luger. In a perfect world, Brody and Hogan would be able to work together and it would be epic. Brody was a wild man and he cut some wild promos. With his scarred up forehead, crazy hair, and furry boots, and swinging his chain, he would have turned the WWE on its head. I think a great way to establish him as a huge threat would have been to have him beat Andre the Giant. Beating the biggest man on the roster would make him a huge heel, and only the immortal Hulk Hogan can stand up to him. If you put Bobby Heenan with Bruiser Brody, it would put the feud over the top. Also, it would set up WrestleMania 3 better. Heenan brought Brody to take the title from Hogan, and when it didn't work, so he would have to bring Andre to the dark side. I wish this one had worked out and happened. It would have been great for Brody to get a huge payday, and I would have got to see two of my favorite old school stars working a big match. Number 1, Lex Luger. Lex Luger rose quickly through the ranks of professional wrestling. Within his first couple years in the business, he was the crown jewel of the Four Horsemen, and eventually would have several high-profile world title matches with Ric Flair. If he had shown up in the WWE in 1988, I think him versus Hulk Hogan would have been a natural fit. They were both trained by Hiro Matsuda, and Luger had a better physique than the Hulkster. Luger as a heel really gave off this arrogant, better-than-you vibe. This match could have been a great main event for WrestleMania 4. The 80s were all about money and power. Luger could have been this smug, yuppie scumbag, and Hogan could have represented the working man, essentially ripping off what worked for Dusty Rhodes versus Ric Flair. I know I keep harping on this point, but it's true. A manager worked against Hogan, and Bobby Heenan with Luger would have been huge. WrestleMania 4 was held in Trump Plaza, and they could have done great vignettes of Luger and Heenan schmoozing with Donald Trump and the mega rich, while Hogan is cutting promos out amongst the working class people. The only thing that would be worrisome is Luger was green and not that great in the ring. But I think Hogan is underrated as a worker and storyteller in the ring. He would have made sure they had a great match with a lot of drama. Well, there you have my list of dream opponents for the Hulkster. It's cool thinking about how these matches would have rewritten history. Let us know in the comments below what are some dream opponents you wish we had seen battle Hulk Hogan. Thanks for watching, and remember to like and subscribe.